Hello, my name is Fadius Salmon Mwijage from Edukea Tanzania. I'm a history teacher of advanced level. So, welcome to this session. We are proceeding with our topic, which is the rise of capitalism in Europe. In the last session, we ended on the contribution of Tudor monarchs to the rise of capitalism. So, let us proceed with the laws of navigation acts to the development of mercantilism in Britain. First of all, before looking to the laws of navigation acts, let us know its definition. Navigation acts were the acts designed to tighten the governments of rival nations' control over trade between England, its colonies, and the rest of the world. Navigation acts mean these were acts which were designed by the English government in order to tighten the government of rival nations to control over the trade in or between England, its colonies, and other rest of the world. So those navigation acts were aimed to prohibit or to stop those rival nations in practicing trade with English colonies, England itself, and the rest of the world. So after looking the definition of navigation acts, let's see the laws that played by navigation acts to the rise or development of mercantilism in Britain. The first law, it enabled English monarch to collect taxes. It means the navigation acts, it aimed at prohibiting the rival nations to conduct trade with England, its colonies, and the rest of the world. In which sense? In the sense that if any European nation wished to conduct trade with these areas which I have mentioned, England, its colonies, and the rest of the world, must use the English vessels and ships to transport goods or raw materials from the productive areas to the market or from productive areas to the industries. So that's the use of ships and vessels of England led to the collection of taxes from that ships which were borrowed or were used from the English government. So it increased the English revenue through the collection of taxes. Another law, it simplified the transportation of British raw materials from the colonies by the British vessels. It means the navigation acts come up with the laws or actions which prohibited the use of other vessels or ships rather than the using of British or English vessels in transporting English raw materials from the productive areas to the industrial places or centers. So through that action led to the development of mercantilism in the sense that those vessels were enabled the merchants to transport their raw materials and goods from productive areas to markets and the productive areas to the industries. That stimulated the development of sea route transportation. Another law of navigation act to the development of mercantilism in Britain, it allowed English merchants to carry cargo. It means the navigation acts allowed only English merchants to use ships and placed harsh conditions and other taxes or other tariffs to those rival nations to use English ships in carrying cargoes, but in the case of English merchants, we are favored to use English ships and vessels to carry their cargoes. So you can see how those English merchants were favored, and that led to the development of mercantilism in Britain and not other rival nations. This was the third law. The fourth one, it enabled Britain to monopolize trade with colonies. It means that during that era, navigation acts come up with various acts which prohibited rival nations to conduct trade with English colonies. So it paved the way for Britain or England to practice trading activities with its colonies. That led to the development of mercantilism. So the whole processes of trade were monopolized by Britain in British colonies. So that led to the prevail of mercantilism in Britain. Another law, it developed and strengthened marine technology. You have to remember that during the Mercantile or Navigation Act, during the era of mercantilism, as navigation acts were passed through, the marine technology were developed. In which sense? In the sense that the tools and transport means which must be used were designed to be used through sea routes. So ships and vessels were made for transportation through sea or through water. So through that, the technology of marine were developed because there were accessibilities of tools and equipments for marine transportation. So from that scenario led to the development of mercantilism as the contribution of navigation acts that were placed by the government of Britain. The last one, it illustrated other colonial powers to use British ships. So according to the navigation acts they designed by the British government, it places that and it restricted that any European nation, if he or she wants to transport his or raw materials or goods from the productive areas to markets or productive areas to industries, must use the British ships or vessels. For example, Portugal used the British ships into transportation of raw materials and goods. That thing which contributed to the payment of taxes and tariffs for the use of British vessels. So in that sense, led to the development of mercantilism in Britain. After looking the roles which played by the Navigation Act to the development of mercantilism in Britain, let us look on why England was the leading mercantile power in Europe. Why England was the leading mercantile power in England, or what are the reasons that made England to be the mercantile power or leading mercantile power in Europe? The first reason was the role of Tudor monarchy. The role of Tudor monarchy gave the chance or gave the prior chance to the English government to conduct mercantilism for provision of security to the merchants in conducting their activities. So the Tudor monarchy or the government provided security in such of provision of armies and military personnel to to protect the merchants in their activities freely, and no disturbance which were happened, because there were stable and strong security that were provided by the Tudor monarchy by that time. So that led to England to be the leading mercantile power in Europe, because there were no any country which could attack the English merchants, because there is stable security that was provided by the Tudor monarchy or English government. The another reasons for why England was the leading mercantile power in Europe, it is the Enclosure System. As we know that England, specifically in the Enclosure System was the law which was the reasons which made England to be the leading mercantile power in Europe, in the sense that those land which were owned by the landlords, peasants, tenants, and thieves were enclosed to be the large tract of land and to be owned by the merchants to establish various economic activities like agricultural sector and industrial activities, whereby that land, due to the large scale agriculture and industries to be built there, it led to the increase in production of raw materials and the manufactured goods that led to the presence of sufficient of supply to the population and presence of abundant raw materials to feed the industries in England. So that led to the England to be leading mercantile power in Europe, because the Enclosure System favored them. Another reason was development of marine technology. So we can see that the development of marine technology led to the England to be the leading mercantile power in Europe, in a sense that those ships, vessels, canoes, and compass directions and other tools and equipments which were used in marine transportation was made England to be the leading mercantile power. So these technological advancements or technological equipments which were made in England led to be England as the superpower or mercantile power in Europe by that time, because there were enough equipments to transport in sea routes. Another reason, it is fighting rival nations. It means that England was fighting rival nations to ensure that there is protectionism of the market for English raw material, English products or manufactured goods. And England ensured that no any European nation must enter on the market of English manufactured goods or in English market. So it's supposed and to establish various laws to fight those rival nations in various ways, either by waging war, like when England waged the war between Spain and England and French with England. So there were various wars which were waged by the England to fight rival nations to ensure that Their merchants are practicing their trading activities freely without any disturbance from any rival nations. So you can see what made England to be the leading mercantile power in Europe by that time. And another factor or reason was acquisition of more colonies. We have to remember that during the mercantile era, England was the leading nations of having many colonies more than other nations in Europe. It means that England had almost 13 colonies in America, like Caribbeans, West Indies, in Mexico, and other areas. So through of owning or having many colonies or more colonies led to the increase in production of both raw materials and manufactured goods that increased the supply for commodities to make trade or commerce in other areas, internal and international market. So through that make England to be the leading mercantile power in Europe by that time. And the last one or last reason for the England to be the leading mercantile power in Europe was enactment of protective laws. It means English government enacted various protective laws to ensure that the English merchants must involve themselves in trading activities without any disturbance. And they decided to wage huge and high tariffs to those rival nations to ensure that they are failing to go with that laws and acts which were introduced by the English government for giving the room for England to prevail and produce and maximize the profit. So the protective laws, as we have shown, the various acts or laws were introduced, like Navigation Acts of 1650, the first Navigation Act, the Act of 1651, the Act of 1652, and the Act of 1660. Those were all acts which were protective to protect England from the disturbance from other rival nations in English market. So after looking the reasons that make England to be the leading mercantile power in Europe, let us go to the contribution of mercantilism to the rise of European capitalism. The first contribution of mercantilism was it led to the colonial acquisition. During the mercantilism era, the merchants, working hand in hand with their government, ensured that England must have many colonies. So that colonies enabled many European nations to be accessible in production of raw materials and getting the area for market of their manufactured goods. So due to those presence of colonies, the raw materials were increased, and those raw materials were feeding the industries which were established in European nations. And those colonies were acted as a source of labor to be offering their labor in plantations, industries, and other economic projects which were established by that time by European nations. And those colonial centers were acted as a source of market. It means those manufactured goods were transported and stored in that areas or colonial areas that make those European nations to prevail and make maximum profit, hence the development of European capitalism as contributed by mercantilism. Another contribution was it opened and strengthened transcontinental links. It means mercantilism laid the foundation or drawn the foundation for the rise of European capitalism, in the sense that the intercontinental or transcontinental links is opened and strengthened through the trade which were conducted during that time, which were transatlantic slave trade, which was done by 3 continents: Africa, Europe, and America. So through this trade, the links or the routes through transcontinental were opened, and that stabilized the trading activities between Europe for mainly trading activities in those areas in Africa and America, has acted as source of raw materials, labor, and so on. So you can see how mercantilism led to the development of European capitalism. Another contribution, it facilitated the development of financial institutions. It means during the mercantilism, as we saw in the features of mercantilism, that there was development of banking and the institution insurance and the financial insurance. So those financial institutions and banking were providing the loans and grants to the merchants, and those merchants invested those loans or money in various economic activities like in agricultural sector and the industrial sector. So the production was increased as they had enough money or capital to invest it. So that led to the development or the rise of European capitalism in that way. For example, of financial institutions which were emerged during the mercantilism era was Barclays Bank of 1756, as it founded by those people. And there were another insurance company which was Lloyd Insurance Company. There were another banks like Amsterdam Bank and many financial institutions which financed the merchants to practice their economic activities at their aims of maximization of profits. Hence, the rise of European capitalism as contributed by mercantilism. Another contribution, it created a source of cheap labor, on which sense mercantilism created a source of cheap labor. We have to remember that during the transatlantic slave trade, many Africans were transported from Africa to America and the Caribbean islands to produce in plantations and mines, as well as industries. So you can see the Africans were cheap labor. There were no high price were used to get those laborers. So you can see those labor produced much with no or little wages. That led to the maximization of profit by Europeans. So, for example, in Africa, it's approximated that about 25 million of people were transported from Africa to America and Europe for working in the plantations, mines, and industries. So you can see how African or this cheap labor led to the rise of European capitalism, as they led or increased the production in agriculture and the industries as well as mining center. Another contribution, it led to the development of towns. Mercantilism or mercantile era led to the development of towns like Manchester, Liverpool, Bristol, Lisbon, Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and other towns which were the result of mercantilism, because during that time those towns were acted as the trading centers, and those merchants were using those towns or areas to make trading activities. And as time went on, various merchants established settlements in that area, and as soon as possible those towns grew as big towns, and industries and shops were established that marked the rise of European capitalism. And the last contribution, it led to the rise of bourgeoisie class. It means that during the mercantilism, there were those merchants who rose and started to practice commercial activities. They accumulated a large amount of capital or billions during mercantilism. As I have told you that the merchants were traveling from their motherlands to outside to find or to collect bullions, which were gold and silver and the other precious metals like silver, like diamond, animal skins, slaves, spices, and so on. So due to those merchants to collect those precious metals and properties, led to those merchants to be bourgeoisie class, the people who were rich. They accumulated enough wealth, and those wealth were reinvested in industries and the plantation to ensure that there is much and more production of raw materials and manufactured goods which will be exchanged with Africans, Americans, and Indians in order to maximize the profit, and that will lead to the rise and development of European capitalism. These were the contribution of mercantilism to the rise of European capitalism. After looking at that, there is an exercise here. Two questions. The question number one is to show the footprint left by mercantilism to the rise of capitalism. And the second question is to explain the reasons that made England the leading mercantile power in Europe and in Europe. So ask yourself those questions, think critically, and come up with answer. Thank you for watching me. Welcome in another session. I'm Friday from Edukea Tanzania. Welcome. Thank you.